Okay, so we're going to start the webinar now. If you have any issues with hearing me or anything, please just let me know in the chat and we'll try and sort that out. So this webinar will go through well, basics and more advanced stuff about the dashboard interactivity in Tableau. So why be interactive? Well, it allows the dashboard to be dynamic. It's also, fun to use. It's a very important part of the whole journey through a data set and analyzing it. So it allows users to drill down into data to drive their own analysis. They're quite easy to implement in a lot of cases, but they're very powerful. So you can really dive a lot deeper into the data with actions than if you just have a static dashboard. So we will cover filtering, highlight actions, URL actions, and a bit on navigation and go to sheet actions. If I just go over into Tableau. So we'll start with filter actions. These are essentially actions that change the data that's available in the view. So for example, here, if I click on Texas, it will filter the rest of the dashboard for just the sales for Texas. If I click off that and click on another state, let's say California, it will change the sales by month for California and the category sales. Another example of filter action is highlight. It is hover. So when I hover over these bars, it will filter the whole dashboard for these certain categories, so office supplies and technology. So this is quite a basic example of a filter action. So I'll just quickly go through making this and how I've implemented this. So if we go into a new Tableau sheet, and feel free to follow along or just watch examples, it's entirely up to you. So I'm just going to connect to a recent data source. So the data source all in the link. Here we go. So you should all be using this data source if you're following along. It's just the built-in data set that comes with Tableau. So what we'll do is we'll start with making the map, which is state profit on the US. So if we just go to country region, double click on country region, this will Tableau has an inbuilt mapping functionality, so it will recognize geographic fields automatically. So if I double click on country region, it puts it onto detail here. I'll then drag state, which you can find obviously on the left-hand side of the data pane in the dimensions. I drag state onto detail as well. This will automatically draw a point for each state that it recognizes. So here you can see the whole US is populated. And what I'll do now is I'll just drag profit down in the measures onto color. This will automatically color the states. It'll turn it into a polygon map and color the states based on the profit. I'll now make another sheet for the monthly sales. So this is just a line chart showing sales over a continuous month. So I'll make this by dragging sales onto my rows. This will automatically be aggregated by Tableau into the sum of sales. And then I'll right click. So a little tip on Tableau, if you right click and drag, it will automatically pop up with an option of the type of date part or type of date you want essentially. So I'll just move down to the green continuous and click on month. So quite a basic line chart, but we'll show our sales over a month. So the other part of the dashboard was category sales. So I'll just drag category onto rows. It just gives us our furniture, office supplies and technology, and our sales onto columns. So these are our three sheets. Be helpful if I named them. Again, obviously a good convention to get into and a habit to get into is to name all your sheets as you go along. I'm obviously not listening to my own advice here, but obviously when you have a bigger workbook, more and more sheets will get more and more confusing. So name as you go along, just give them basic names. And I'll open up a dashboard that I created a dashboard by clicking on this icon down here, which is just a square separated into 4 smaller squares with a plus. So this dashboard, to create it, I would just drag my sheets into the dashboard. I use automatic tiling here, so if you can see the tile is just selected here. You can use floating as well, but for now I'll just keep it on tiling. Then I'll drag my sales by month below it. So as you can see, this little gray square will show where it's appearing. This will appear below the map. And then my category sales onto the right, again highlighted by this square. I'll just click on this little drop down for more options to say fit entire view. I'll just pause for a minute just to ensure everyone's at the stage if they're following along. Okay, so now we will configure the actions. So there's a couple of ways you can implement dashboard actions on Tableau. So when I first learned Tableau, the first thing I realized, well, the way I use dashboard actions was to use as filter, this little filter chart here. So what this does, if you click it, will mean that it will use the map here or the sheet selected as a filter for the rest of the dashboard. Similar functionality to how as I showed before. However, this filters the whole dashboard, so it doesn't allow much flexibility with your actions. So if I uncheck that, I'll show you an alternative way, and this will allow you to have more flexibility when you're configuring filter actions. So if you click on dashboard at the top of the workbook and move down to actions, it'll bring up this window, which is an add action window. So if I add an action and I select filter, so because we're using filters, this window pops up, the configuration window. So at the top here, name your filter. Obviously, the first thing to do, I just call this map filter, basic name. And it says a short source sheet that's working on. So this is dashboard 1, we only have one dashboard. This means that all actions will be working on this dashboard and no other dashboard. The type of action, so if I hover over a state, if I select if I hover over it, it will provide the action. If I select it, which I will choose now, it means I have to click on the actual point or the mark, or in this case with the map, the state, to trigger the filter action. Or I can click on menu, and this is an alternative one where once you click on the point, in this case, click on the state, a white square box will come up with a link that says click here to filter, or whatever you name the filter. I'll go over this later on in another action. So I'll just leave it on select for now. At the top here is the sheet that you want. Is the source sheet. So in this case, it will be the map. So essentially, I leave that ticked. So when I click on a map, that will become the filter. And I will untick the map and ensure just sales by month and category sales are the ones that are filtered. This little section here essentially determines what happens once you click off the filter. So once I click off the state, show all values essentially means that once I click off it, everything will go back to how it appeared at the start, as if no filter was in place. Leave the filter. This will, once I click off, it will mean the last selection will stay on the dashboard. So if I clicked on Texas, leave the filter would leave just text values. And exclude all values, this will mean that all values, so it will remove all values out of the filter. So once you click on it and then click off, nothing will appear on that chart. We'll go over this later on. So I'll leave it show all values. This section we won't discuss too much here. You can pick selected fields. So if you wanted to select on a chart just date and time filters, you could choose that here, but we'll leave it for all fields for now. So there's my map filter. Run on select, source dashboard, press OK. And here you can see now that when I click on a state, just the bottom charts are filtered. And if you remember from the first dashboard, the other alternative, the other filter action was when I hover over these, it will filter the rest of the dashboard. So again, I'll go back to dashboard and actions, and I'll add an action here. Filter again. This time I want the source sheet to be my category cells. So I'll leave that as my source sheet, and my target sheets will be my map this time, not my category cells, and my cells by month. And this time I'll select hover, run action on hover. Again, I'll leave this section show all values, and press OK. Oh, again, remember to name your action, so I'll call this hover action. Press OK. So now you can see as I hover over the category cells, office supplies, technology, furniture, it will filter the dashboard. So that's just an example of fairly basic filter actions, but as you can see, they're very powerful. If you want to just look at furniture sales, you can dive down straight away into the data and see that Texas, for example, is doing it very poorly. So that's one example. If we go on to another dashboard, here is another example of filter action. So at the top, you can see that this bar selector, which shows their sales for each region. If you click on each one of these, it will filter the dashboard below for each one of these regions. Creating a stack bar chart like this is quite a useful way of, quite useful and quite common way of making a filter, as it's quite clean and it's easy to act as a button for a filter. So another action here is, this is an example of a menu action. So once I click on subcategory sales, it provides this little hyperlink here that will then filter. In this case, it's just filtering sales over time. It's just another sort of variant for users to choose from in terms of filtering. So I will quickly build this dashboard. Actually, I guess we won't build this dashboard. We'll go on to a slightly harder one. This is just an example. The only change from the one before is this being a menu filter action, which I can show you how I did that. So if we go back to my other Tableau, if I wanted to change this hover action into a menu, into the menu action that was on the other chart, we go to actions, and I'll go on my hover action, edit that, and move that to menu. Press OK, press OK. Now you can see when I click on this, it will filter with that, with the menu pop-up. Okay, so there are a lot of things you can do with actions. I'll go over now slightly more advanced action. It's probably advanced as it comes with dashboard actions, but you can do some really powerful things with them. So if you see here, so this is a dashboard where the user is encouraged to select a state on this map, and it will show the sales over time, and it will also show a pop-up of, I'll put this on full view screen to make it easier. So as you can see, this bar chart pops up at the bottom, which is the top cities within that state for their sales, and it will disappear once I click off it. Also, I just unpinned my map there. I'll go over that later, but essentially it zooms in on the state. It looks very clean. This is quite a useful tip to learn in Tableau. It frees up a lot of dashboard space, and it's quite simple to implement. So I'll go back to my other Tableau and show you how I made this. So the first thing we made was profit, well, just sales on states and for the country. So I will make this by dragging country and region onto detail. Again, as before, you can do this with the profit map if you're following along. I would just make another one for now. And then state onto detail, give me a mark for each state. And then I will drag sales onto color. Nice, simple, easy map. Let's call this sales map. Quite an intuitive name or genius name. So now we will make, we've already got the sales time, sales by time, sales by month chart down here. So we don't need to remake that. And then I'll make my top 5 cities. So I'll explain how I'm making this. Some of you may be familiar with a top filter, and this dashboard also involves context filters and sort of the order of operations in Tableau. I'll explain that as I go along. There's a couple of little, if you were trying to make the previous dashboard with the pop-up as we're going along, there are a couple of sort of potholes and trips that you may have encountered. So we will make, so I'll drag city onto rows to make the final chart, and I'll drag sales onto columns. And then I will sort this little button here at the top. And this now shows all the cities based by the total number of sales descending. So we only want to look at the top 5. So here I will click on the little drop down here on the filter city section and click on filter. And at the top of the filter card, there's this top section. So you can filter, in Tableau, you can filter in many ways. You can select individually, you can use certain wildcards, certain conditions, and one of the most common ones is using the top filter. So this, I can select the top states based on a certain piece of criteria. So here by field, I can select the top 10. You can even insert a parameter here if you're familiar with parameters. This is essentially user-generated value where the user on the dashboard can select what value they're using. So right now, I would just select 5. This is computed by sales, the sum of sales. That's okay. And as you can see now, the chart is automatically filtered for the top 5 cities within, well, that's currently no state, but the top 5 cities in the whole data set. So I will just create this dashboard. Once again, I will need to name my sheet, not following my own advice, top cities. So I'll drag my sales map onto my dashboard. And so to create this, you need to know, I'll just redo this. So you need to know a little about containers and how dashboards are created in Tableau. So in Tableau, containers are essentially a way of organizing and structuring your dashboard. They're just essentially boxes that you put charts and maps, etc., into to allow more structure and evenly spaced things, and essentially just make your life easier when creating a clean looking dashboard. So there are 2 types. There are horizontal, essentially where if I dragged a horizontal in, I could put 2 sheets next to each other and horizontal next to each other, and it appeared like this. What I'm going to use for this dashboard is a vertical. So as if you remember at the start, the dashboard here, the charts are stacked on top of each other. So I'll drag my container in first, my vertical container. I'll drag my sales map. So as a default, it will fill up the entire container. And then I will drag another container in, and you can see where it's being placed by the little gray box at the bottom of this. And I will drag my sales by month into this container. Again, by default, it will automatically fill the container up. And then I will use this thing called a blank, and I'll drag this into the container. Essentially a blank, they're used as placeholders. So when designing things, I'll drag it in again by you can see it by the gray shading. They're used as placeholders. So they'll be dragged into containers, and they're a barrier where you can insert one sheet on one side, one sheet on the other, and then can be removed later. If this is not that clear to you, essentially just if you're following along, just drag a blank in below the sales by month. And the next thing that I will do, I drag my top cities, and below that blank, I will put the top cities. So essentially right now, we have 2 containers in this dashboard, and you can see which containers you're using by clicking on the little drag thing at the top and double clicking. So within this sheet, it's within this container because it has a blue box around it. And then in the large container, this sheet, it has 2 sheets. It has this one and this container. So first I'll configure the actions and I'll show you why this breaks at the start. So if I go to dashboard and I go to actions, I'll just pause here for a second if you're following along before. I'd like to point out, if you have any questions or any issues with the sound, etc., please post in the chat in Zoom. I try and respond to them as we go along. So we'll just continue with making this, this dashboard. So the first action, again, it's a filter action. This is my map action. I'll just call it map zoom action just to differentiate from how we called it before. So this dashboard 2 is my source sheet. This means that everything will be configured on this dashboard. And so first, if you can remember from dashboard 4, it's a select. So it's a select action. I want my sales by month. I want it to be on my map sales. So when I click on my map, it will filter for the rest of the dashboard. So there's actually 2 actions in this dashboard. The first one alters the line chart. So, and it also alters itself. So if you remember on my Tableau, when I click on the map, it zooms into the map. So it also filters itself. Maybe an odd concept, but it looks cool when you zoom in, well, I think anyway. So if you click sales by map, that's where it's the source sheet, and it's going to target itself. So I'll leave that ticked, but I won't target the cities for now. If you can remember from the first sheet, they disappear. So that has to be a separate action. So this is targeting itself and also the sales by month. We'll leave it on show all values and leave everything else as it is. So if you are unable to access the data set that provided through that link, all Tableau, if you're using Tableau and following along, just use any version of Superstore. They're very minor differences. There may be a difference in the configuration of the maps you have. This will work for the same. If let's say you had a UK map, this would work in the same way. The link, I'll try and get working, but if not, just use the Superstore that you can find down in your data source, your opening data source, or it's found in your My Tableau repository. Please ask if you are unsure how to get to that data source. It's just the built-in one that Tableau uses. So that's my first action. If we press OK, you can see that, well, currently you can see that it doesn't filter on, the map doesn't filter, it only filters by month. We'll fix that. And obviously it's not targeting the top cities. So if you go to dashboard, I'll configure the second action and then we'll get this all to work together. So I'll add an action filter and I'll call this my city filter. This will be, again, it will be on my map sales if I tick the right thing. And this time it will only filter the top cities. But the difference this time is I will exclude all values. Choose select. Often it automatically defaults to a menu, so just remember to press select. And now this will just, once I click off the top cities, it will remove all these values. You'll be able to see this now. So if I click on, so I'll click on my top cities and fit entire view, and I'll just hide my title for now. So as you can see on some states, they don't actually appear on the, when I click on them, nothing happens. Essentially, this is because it's only showing the cities where they are in the actual top 5 that we selected previously on the sheet here. So in some of these states, for example, New Mexico, no cities in that top 5 are present. So nothing is currently showing. We don't want this. We want the top 5 for each state when selected. So what we need to do is we need to go to our top cities and we need to click on our action and add this to context. So essentially, a context filter is it's a type of, it's to do with the order of operations in Tableau, in the order that Tableau does things. But a context filter will mean that the filter for the top 5 cities will happen after the action. So this action, when I click on it, it will mean that it will show all the top 5 cities for that state. As previously, before, it was showing just the top 5 cities across the whole data set, and some of those didn't occur. So dashboard actions come after the filter before. So when you add it to context, it moves up that order of operations and means that Tableau computes that first, and then we'll apply the action. Then we'll apply the filter. So the other thing that needs to be done is we'd like the zoom in feature. So when currently, as you can see on the filter card, there is no action. As you can see on the top cities, there is an action. So we want essentially this sales action, this dashboard action to happen to the map as well to zoom in. So what I'm going to do firstly, actually, is I'm just going to remove this from context, so it's a little bit clearer. We'll redo that, and I'll right-click on that, and I'll move down to Apply to Worksheets and Selected Worksheets. So we want it to apply also onto our sales map. So essentially, it filters itself. So just click Sales Map, and top cities will automatically be included anyway. So if we click on the sales map, you can now see that the map is filtering itself. If we go back to top cities, I will just move this back to context. So then those cities come, add to context here. I believe it's because we have to. So now if we go to the sales map, in fact, if I remove this filter for now, bring the map back. So currently our dashboard, I've removed this from context. For this entire view, I'll unpin this. And there we go. So the map, the zoom in feature, I believe the context filter is actually affecting this. So if I just remove this off the sales map, go back to my other dashboard. So you can see the filter is on that map. And then when we zoom in, below pops out zooms into the map and then pops out the chart. So this sort of collapsing container feature, it's quite a powerful way of expanding things in your dashboard, fitting things in. It has a bit of a wow factor as well, especially if you're creating a dashboard for a client. So that's basically advances filter actions get. That's where we'll stop on filter actions. We'll go on to highlight actions. If you have any questions, please just put them into the chat. So highlight actions are, well, actually, before we go on to highlight actions, I'll talk about another form of filtering, how when I first started, this was how I first thought filter actions were implemented. So essentially on a worksheet, you can apply a filter by creating a quick filter. Essentially, this way you will drag a dimension onto the filter pane and show the filter, and it will appear here. This is a way of filtering the dashboard. If I go to here, this is a way of filtering the dashboard. So for technology, for example, office supplies. So I'll just pause here and go back onto the filter advanced dashboard. So if you see on my sales map, I have my action. So to clarify what's going on here, the action, country, region, state, one of the actions when I select on the map means that I zoom in on it. So if we go to my dashboard actions, my map selector is configured as sales map, filters itself and sales time series. Show all values, select. And my bar chart, sales map doesn't feature itself. Top 5 cities, exclude all values. And my sales map. So when you apply this action into the filter pane, it means that it now, or not in this, but in the action, dashboard action, it features, filters itself. Your zoom may not be working if it's pinned. So sometimes the map will pin, select this, and it may affect if your map zooms in on itself. So we'll move on to highlight for now. I'll go back again on that the advanced filter actions if anyone's still having trouble at the end. So essentially this was just to talk about ways of filtering. I would always recommend trying to use dashboard actions over using quick filters. Quick filters, they run a query each time to the database, and it slows down the sort of efficiency of a dashboard. So each time I select a category filter, it's running a query to, Tableau is running a query to the data source to bring back just office supplies. And then if I have other filters down the line, this is also running back, it's requesting a query for both office furniture supply, office supplies, and then whatever's selected down in the subcategory. Again, with ship mode. So each time it runs a query to the data source, which will reduce Tableau dashboard, where it will basically reduce the load, it will increase load time. So once dashboard actions, they don't do this. They essentially just filter what's on the dashboard, and so don't run a query. So if you're thinking of adding a filter pane like this, and it can be done in dashboard action, they interact with each other, I would say do that. There's obviously benefits for each. If you've only got one filter, a basic filter, then that's your way forward. So highlight actions. Highlight actions, they differ from filter actions in the sense that they don't remove data from the view. They allow you to compare other points with each other, and they will just highlight a selection of points if you're creating a selection. So on this dashboard, you can see that as I click on, this dashboard essentially shows the top customers on sales and a scatter plot of their sales over profit. So if I click on this, it will highlight a particular point. I can click on multiple. If I select, and it'll highlight their points. And here, again, it's a highlight the other way. So if I wanted to select these customers, you can see highlighted on the chart above which ones they are. So if I just wanted to look at this one, because they have a high sales number, it's maybe an interesting customer to you, it will highlight where they are on the line, on the bar chart. So I'll just go quickly through making this and how to configure a highlight action before I go to the other Tableau and I make a new sheet. It was just customer name, and I'll drag that onto rows. We'll add all members, and then sales on my columns. Then I will sort this descending, and that's essentially it. We're not going to filter on anything up there. Then I'll make my scatter plot. I'll call this top customers. I can't spell it right. Top customers. And then we'll make the scatter plot. So scatter plot is made by two measures. So I'll run my sales. Actually, I'll put my sales onto my columns and my profit onto my rows. So by default, Tableau aggregates everything into one value. So all of my sum of sales and all my sum of profit. I'll just change this into a circle. And we want to break this up by customer name. So if I drag customer name onto detail, this will create a separate mark for every single customer. Just some formatting things here. I'll increase the size slightly. And on color, on the color card, I'll just reduce the opacity. Call this my scatter. And now I'll quickly just throw these onto a dashboard. So my top customers, I'll drag onto the top and my scatter below. There was also an average line. So to create an average line, you click here at the top on the analytics pane. And here on the average line. Click it and drag on. And we're having one on the average sales and the average profit. So I'll drag one onto the table section. So this little sum sales pill is highlighted. And that will drag the average sales line. And then I'll drag another one on and do it for my average profit. So that's the scatter plot on my dashboard. They're both the sheets on there. So I'll click on dashboard and click on my actions. So I'll add an action, and this time I'll select highlight action. I'll call this bar chart highlight. So the first action we'll configure is on the top customers. So that's my source sheet. Let's configure a menu action this time. So again, we want it to just target the scatter. So this essentially means that when I click on this line, it will highlight that customer in the chart below. I'll then configure it so it goes the other way, and because a scatter plot is essentially, well, one of the reasons scatter plot is so good is you can see outliers. So if I wanted to see, which customers these were that are providing the highest profit, I could highlight over them. Well, I could select them to highlight their total sales. So in my dashboard, I'll just configure another action, add action, highlight again. This one will be my scatter plot as my source sheet, and it will target my top customers. I use select this time. You can use also hover, but it's harder to focus on a certain point when marks are close together. So I click select. So now, once I select a mark, I can see where the total sales and who they are. I can also select a group of people by clicking and hovering over, and it will highlight them on the map. So that's just an example of highlight actions. I'll go through a few more examples because they are quite powerful. We won't build them out, but I'll show you things that can be done. So this is a % difference in sales and for all the states. and a list of states on the left. So someone can click on California, for example, and it will highlight there's different sales in 2016, and also highlight where they are on the sales profit scatter plot with their labels. This can be done for all states. So highlight actions, the main difference is from filter actions that you can compare to other marks. They can be combined on multiple dashboards, filter and highlight actions. Just depends on how you want the analysis or the user of the dashboard to analyze their data. So a neat example with highlight actions is by combining it with reference lines. So this chart here shows essentially by quarter of order date, the sales differing by the type of ship mode. And I've configured the highlight action so a reference line will appear when I hover over a mark, and it will show those marks along that line. So it's a pretty neat way of comparing points. So here, great example, they're colored by the line, and you can see all for 2018 Q4 the values. So I'll just show you how this is configured. This is actually on a worksheet, it's not on a dashboard. So I click on the worksheet tab and actions, exactly the same as the dashboard way. And it's, if you tell, it was on a hover action, but I'm actually targeting specific field here. So my source sheet is my X, this is the title of the sheet down here. It's a hover action, and I click on target highlighting under dates and times. So this will highlight the specific, it will highlight basically the specific date and time that I hover over for each line. So that's how you configure that. Press OK. And as you can see, it will produce a label for each highlight. A neat little trick here, if you want your marks to be, so you will need to show mark labels for this to happen. So on the label sheet, just click label, show mark labels. And if you click on the drop down of the font, a neat little trick here is you can click match mark color. And this, for each figure, will match the line to the color of the line. The final part was just dragging on a reference line. So essentially this was just literally clicking a reference line and dragging it onto quarter. This then updates for when you hover. Just when you click on it, press OK. The configuration window, don't change anything here. The only thing I changed was to remove any labels, just because it cluttered the view up a little bit. And press OK. And when you hover over a mark, that reference line will move to that mark. I have two reference lines on here right now, so that will move as you move along. So that is highlight actions. Those are the two most powerful actions. I will go over some examples of a URL action and a go to sheet action before we finish. So there's about 10 more minutes that we'll go over. URL actions, they are useful. They're useful if you want to link out to a company website, for example. Click on a logo and it can link out to a website, or you can email out using a similar action. So let's say on your dashboard, you have, for example, a customer support helpline on your dashboard. Someone wants to, someone can be using your dashboard, but they want to ask a question. They can click and it will take you, it will automatically bring up your email. So an email to them on your email browser. We'll quickly go over, so these are configured, as sheet actions. So this action is configured, this is a URL action, and when I click on a state, Texas, it will take me to the Wikipedia of Texas. It adds, this is quite, so how these actions can be used, it adds more sort of context to the dashboard. So if you were looking at sort of famous sites within a country, you could have them on a map and it can take you to more information on Wikipedia for that site. In this sense, we get taken to the Wikipedia page for each state. This it's just, this map is just sales over sales again, as we made before, sales colored by sales on our map. So I'll show you how this worksheet action is configured. So it's on a worksheet, it's not on a dashboard right now. Again, the same way, worksheet actions, and add action, go to URL. I'll go through building this actually in my other Tableau. So if you click here on to, if you're following along this previous made sales map, if not, it's just sales on country, region, state. Again, Tableau automatically generates. Oh, and label, show mark labels. Oh, let's just take state off. No, excuse me. Let's undo that. Some cells, and then click state. Then move state onto label. And this will now label each state where there is room. So to configure this action, well, first of all, if we go to Wikipedia, and we'll type in Texas, for example. So you can see here that the URL is quite simple. It's just Wikipedia or Wiki Texas. So if we go back to the worksheet action, I copied that and I go to dashboard, worksheet action, add action, go to URL. So I will select my sales map on my source sheet. I will configure a menu action because sometimes on the dashboard you don't want them clicking randomly on things and it takes them to a separate worksheet, so a separate URL. And in the URL, I will just paste what we had from Wikipedia. So you can see here that the Texas is the thing that's specific to the link. And to configure this, we want to remove that, or highlight and remove where Texas was, and click on this little arrow here. And here, Tableau allows us to parameterize what goes into the link. So here I will click state, as we want the state to change when we click on a state, and then that will input this little parameter here. If we press OK, this means now that I should click on a state, I click 1 because I've named it very poorly, and it takes us to Utah. Quite a neat way of getting more context to a dashboard. Another example of this, which we won't go through, well, we won't make, is products. So in the Superstore, this is a list of all the products, and you can Google that exact product name. It's quite a neat way of adding more context to the dashboard. You can also embed these worksheets directly into a dashboard. So for here, for example, instead of taking us out, it will actually just load that sheet within the dashboard. And these are configured by dragging a web page object into the sheet. Then enter the URL in the same way as before and parameterize the state as we used before. It's just another way of using URL actions. Personally, I think linking out of a sheet, linking out if you want a URL action, I think personally including it in a dashboard, it's not so effective. It takes up a lot of room. It is good if you want to include an image. So if you clicked on text you wanted to, or let's say you had important sites across a country, it would bring up an image within the dashboard. So this is another one. With the products, essentially you click on a product and it will highlight down below. I will quickly run through an email action. So example, you create a dashboard and you want someone to email you if they had any questions. If you click on this, click to email, it takes you to your email. This is configured in the same sense. So dashboard actions, it's add even though it's email, just you go to URL action again, and I'll edit that. And the syntax is as follows: mail to email, put your email, question mark, and then subject, and this will fill out the subject line. Okay, that action obviously won't work now, as it has to be configured with a correct email address and a subject. So there are several other actions that you can use throughout Tableau. There is a go to sheet action. This basically will take on a dashboard will take you to a specific sheet, and these can be useful when you have too much information. Well, one of the ways they can be used is if you want to show more information that does not fit onto a dashboard. It can also take you to another dashboard. So let's say you had analysis on states, but you also wanted city analysis, but not including the dashboard. You can have another dashboard that was your city analysis, that when you clicked on a go to sheet, you can configure a go to sheet action, it would take you to that dashboard. So here I click on the map and it takes me to my previous map. So I will just show you how that action is configured. Let's run on select. Source sheet is the dashboard it runs on, and the sheet within that dashboard, helpfully named by me, but you can see sheet 22 is the map. And you select a target sheet. So the target sheet effect was my URL map order, and this is essentially where it takes you to. So that's a fairly brief overview of all the actions you can use on Tableau dashboards. Again, they're very powerful and it's simple to implement. Filter and highlight are the ones you use the most. Filter probably most of all. Again, URLs and email actions are sort of additional information that can be added to a dashboard. So thank you all for those who followed along. Hope this is helpful, and the webinar ends now.